with comics, as Chester mentioned, they've all sort of this sort of legendary moment where the three of them have drawn each other. You know, this is what, 2001, 2003-ish?
Well, I think this scene is supposed to be taking place in 1999.
Okay, so but at least this area of this point in time, these three were hanging out together, drawing sketchbooks together. They end up as characters in their own books, but in the book, they also work as Seth and Joe Matt end up standing in for arguments about prostitution,
Right.
either for or against it. Let's start with Joe Matt. Let's talk a little about Joe Matt, because again, as a cartoonist, you know, his last work, we watched him on the floor masturbating to porn for, and that was 2005. I don't know if he's still there on the floor. That book is called Spent. But it seems that, you know, one of the things that makes his rage so funny to me is this is someone, and you as his friend seem to be suggesting that he could perhaps benefit from moving out of the waiting in line for sex to the paying for it sex line. But they work not just as your friend, but also as a stand-in for sort of arguments against why this is a bad idea.
Sure, I do think it would work for Joe if he was willing to give himself over to it. But you know, different people want different things. I just think Joe's never going to totally get what he wants. He wants a totally gorgeous babe who also is wildly in love with him, and he's around my age, and I don't know.
It sounds like it's interesting that there's so much emphasis on people finding him special, and it sounds like he doesn't really understand how the romantic game is played. I mean, from the woman's point of view, the guy kind of goes first. Like he makes the first move. He makes you feel special. It sounds like he may not have mastered that.
Well, Joe actually has a certain charm to him.
Yeah.
But do women feel special when they're in his presence?
I wouldn't know how to speak to that.
So in the book, you quote, well, there's a lot. Typical of Chester's work, there are a lot of notes in the back of the book, and he goes into a lot of details. He quotes sociologists, feminists, a lot of history, a lot of politics, and I'm curious how much you got from the actual women you met through conversations like the one you just saw sitting on the bed, or the one you described with Denise speaking a lot later. Like how much of the actual 23, I think is the count, women that you meet sort of inform the arguments, or much more of it is sort of a larger, big picture?
Some. I definitely read a lot about prostitution, and read about the arguments regarding legalization and decriminalization. But mostly, as far as my ideas about that kind of stuff, to the degree that they were formed by the prostitutes I saw, it mostly came from Denise, who had very definite ideas. I asked her, if it was legalized, but one was required to get a license, if she would do so. And she insisted, no way, I'm not, have my photo and name and everything available to government bureaucrats. She just didn't trust the government with that sort of information. So
that's interesting, because we don't really see Denise talking about so much of this, and we'll come back to the end. But Seth does. You use him as a character to bring up sort of like forced health checkups for women. He seems to be, and you kind of mock him at the end when you compare it to smoking, as he's doing, and as we all know Seth is always smoking. But it does seem that you've used Seth as a character to explicitly lay these arguments out for you.
Yeah, I had a choice, because I had similar arguments with my ex-girlfriend Suk-yin, and I just felt that, well, actually Suk-yin did gradually switch over to my point of view, whereas to the best of my knowledge, Seth never has. So yeah, it seemed better to use him as the representative for that for the legalization. side of things.
What? I mean, you're talking about the forced health check stuff?
Yeah.
I mean, people who think that way about prostitutes are deeply misguided. They're just thinking of a prostitute as something other than a fellow citizen. And that's like a totally fucked up way to think about another person in your society. I mean, that's just so obvious to anybody. I think that's like ABC.
Right. Yeah, back when you were working, if you had been, or if prostitutes had been required to get licenses, would you have done so?
No, and the other thing is, it's not only because of the government intrusion aspect, it's just, it's more fun, it's more elegant to do it in a private way. Private sex workers don't want to be registered, and in countries where there is registration, there's plenty of there are plenty of people working outside of the registration system. And they very often have the best businesses. I mean, the people who are in the registered system are kind of in the middle of the market, but the people at the top of the market are outside of that system.
Do you think that question of the legalization or decriminalization is a theme for a lot of your stories?
Not so much. Activism is. The girls in my novels are pretty much opposed to legalization. Even the most activist girl is obsessed with decriminalization and with social legitimacy and acceptance, cultural acceptance. But no, I mean, legalization is, it's not really a big theme in the sex workers movement, except as something that people feel they have to negotiate around. If you live in a country where it's legalized and licensed, then the sex workers movement there is constantly dealing with the government just in a different way than they would here.
Some of the girls that you meet, especially early on in the in-call, don't speak English, or some of them have strange accents. And there are many arguments that Chester goes through in the book, but the one that I wanted to bring up is, in the notes, I was really surprised to learn that this whole idea of like a global sex trade was something you hadn't really even thought about until after you were doing the research.
Yeah, I hadn't really heard about any sort of connection between human trafficking and prostitution until I think it was 2002 that I heard a CBC radio report about it.
Because that's when the whole propaganda campaign against the sex industry started, where everything started being called trafficking. It's kind of like the terrorism of sex, it's like this word started being bandied about.
Yeah,
2002 is when they started.
That's what I thought. So I'm not mistaken
No, you're not imagining it. It was like a concerted propaganda campaign by people who were really objected to the gains that sex workers have made politically.
Yeah, because certain reviewers of the book have said that I should have known about this before, or should have been aware of the connection between trafficking and prostitution.
Well, maybe they should be aware of something, that in the 90s, the sex workers movement made huge gains internationally, and a cabal of feminists and right-wing Christians got together and, through the UN and other kinds of places where sex workers were, making those gains, set out to discredit sex worker organizations. So, and that's how the anti-trafficking hysteria started.
Yeah, well, I mean, he does go more into that one, but let's move on to the end so we can open it up to the conversation. So, Denise, we already brought up. I think it's about 10, 15 pages. We learn these shocking revelations that he is now in a monogamous relationship with a woman who you said you wouldn't even call her a prostitute anymore, but you are paying her, and it's not romantic love, and it's almost like, are you just like arguing?
Do you see yourself as a sugar daddy? A kind of part-time sugar daddy?
I hate that term, but
why? Why?
I don't know.
It's too retro?
I guess. Plus, I don't know, the whole incest kind of thing. Daddy, I don't know.
How are you not just another guy with a girlfriend who expects you to give her money every now and then?
Yeah, but anyways, we should probably clarify. Yeah, I've been monogamous with her for 7 years, and she's been monogamous with me for 4 years. So yeah, at this point it's a completely monogamous relationship, but I am paying her for sex. And yeah, would you consider her a prostitute if I'm her only client? If she's only having sex with one person?
I'm not that hung up on the terminology.
Right.
I feel like if she, there are a lot of people in the sex worker world who, in the sex workers movement, who get really like, how dare you not call yourself a sex worker or a prostitute? But I'm not that worried about it. I mean, I am happy to call myself a prostitute if she doesn't see herself that way.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess
Well-
it's less so much a problem for me as terminology. It's more trying to understand the conclusion of this argument about romantic love. I mean, like, you don't, and I think it's because
So-
of reasons for her privacy, but I just want to know more. Like, do you guys go to the movie? Do you hang out? Do you, like, hold hands on the beach?
But
I mean,
some, but probably less than, regular boyfriends and girlfriends do. But yeah, occasionally we go have dinner together or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
but it's not romantic love.
It depends on how you define romantic love. I mean, there are certain things I definitely don't want. I don't want to get married. I don't want us to ever live together. And I'm not necessarily seeing this as a forever thing. I'm not trying to say it's a relationship for now, and it'll go for as long as we both want it to go. But
But as you move from different escorts and try, there's some wonderful scenes where you just, you get a little uncomfortable or feeling maybe a little down, so you decide to go to someone else. And this happens regularly, but 7 years is a very long time. I mean, it seems like you're invested in this relationship.
yeah,
It's just, would you it wouldn't be the same as like if she just left and you never heard from her again. You think, as that happens when you call some former escorts and the number's been disconnected, as they've moved on. It wouldn't just be like, you wouldn't just get out your old escort book and try to find someone else, would you?
He probably would. I mean,
Or
that's
I
how
guess
these
what-
guys are built. I mean,
I'm not sure what I would do. I probably would at some point. I don't know if I would right away, but maybe I would. I don't know. It's hard. Yeah.
Well, why don't we open it up to the audience, because it's already about 7:40. So we have a microphone, and just raise your hand. And
There is someone way back there.
see?
How many times a week do you have sex, Chester, and how much does it cost?
I see Denise every 2 weeks. I don't know. I feel funny about saying how much money I give her, just because that's like her income. It's like,
then I don't think you need to share that.
yeah.
I mean, people sometimes ask me questions like that, and I just tell them, my mother told me not to discuss money with strangers.
Right. Yeah, I'd be more willing to talk about how much money I got from the Canada Council to do this book than
How much did you get?
41,000
Nice. Canadian or U.S.?
Canadian.
Yeah.
Nice.
But there is a great moment in the book when you're figuring out just financially how much you can afford, and a lovely one when Chester buys an apartment, a house apartment, and you realize
condo, yeah.
a condo, that it's cost so much that now he has a place to bring the whores, but he can't afford them.
Right.
That's the thing about owning property.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question.
Yeah.
I'm here. One of the things I
sorry,
know.
the microphone's
sorry.
back
Oh.
there. Go ahead, microphone girl.
Okay, sorry. One of the things I noticed was that I don't know if it's in the whole book, but at least in the portion that we saw, the prostitute's face is concealed, and at one
Yeah.
point in the conversation, both your face and the prostitute's face are concealed. And I wondered if you could talk a bit about the choice.
Well, I chose to obscure all of their faces. I was a bit torn about that. I considered, obviously, I didn't want to do real likenesses. I didn't want, I wanted to respect their privacy. I don't know that my memory is